morning, good afternoon, good evening, yWhales. My name is Siva Avvaru, Managing Director of yWhales Solutions, and we've got an awesome episode for you guys tonight. I'm joined by two of the co-founders of Bankless Consulting, Ryan Anderson and DSide. Hey guys, how are you guys?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Hey, Siva.
Oh, this is going to be a fun conversation. You know, as a fellow management consultant, I just love any opportunity I can to engage my peers, especially when those peers are focused in our industry that is Web3. Guys, I'm pretty envious of you. You know, when someone searches Web3 consulting, you guys are the first ones to pop up. You know, I've tried so much SEO and we can't even do that. And so, you know, my goal for yWhales Solutions is when we grow up, we want to be like you guys. And that's a testament to your guys' success, you know, as a spinoff of, or not really a spinoff. And maybe you can guys tell me a little bit more about your operating model, but you are built off of the Bankless DAO machine.
Yeah, Ryan's the branding guy, so I'll let you take that one, buddy.
Yeah, we all met in Bankless DAO. It was kind of late 2021, and it was right at the time where a lot of projects were starting to kick off within the DAO, and you know the DAO was really trying to figure out what its goal was, what it was there to do. And so when I was kind of just getting into Web3 and trying to understand what it was, you know, I'd always followed crypto. I'd always followed, NFTs and things like that. My background's in marketing, so I've always tried to really keep on top of what's happening digitally. If I can just, sound like I know what I'm talking about when a client asks me about it. So DAOs were really, for me, the thing that made me go, oh, okay, now this really, something clicked when I found out about DAOs. So I really wanted to kind of dive into that space. And I found these guys who were talking about, starting a professional services firm, a consultancy, which is what I've done for a lot of my career. So I was like, okay, these are my people. So, I kind of went into the first meeting, and it's always funny when you're joining a DAO for the first time. It's like, it's like you walk into Google and say, hey, I work here. What do I do? And then just, go join that meeting, see what you like.
Well, was that meeting? It was a virtual meeting, and if it's Web3, was everyone wearing a different avatar, where cameras off, like that? That's a whole different atmosphere compared to what we're used to in traditional business.
Well, completely anonymous, and everybody's using, except for me. I walked in and used my real name like some kind of noob. But yeah, everybody's using an avatar and a pseudonym. So, but it was interesting because I joined this meeting. I had no idea what to expect, and people started introducing themselves, and it's like, hey, I'm a crypto lawyer with an MBA, and I've been doing consulting for 20 years, and I was like, oh, these are some serious people. So I consider myself very fortunate that they let me play with them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how we met too. And I don't know if you're even aware of this, Ryan, but I was kind of feeling my way around the DAO, Bankless DAO, and spending some time in different groups, different guilds. And I volunteered to do some work on a marketing project where it was basically putting together a pricing package for outside work, external work from the marketing guild. And I'm not really a marketing guy. I'm kind of but I have different talents in different areas of business. So I edited this document. I gave my comments and my ideas, and it looked pretty good. And a couple of days later, I went back to the document, which was being updated asynchronously. And there's all these comments from this guy, Ryan Anderson. And I was like, oh shit, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. He's not just hacking his way through this. And the next thing I knew, we were in a meeting for the consulting group. And I was like, oh, I know you, dude.
Oh, that's awesome. And so, one thing our audience might not be aware of is the actual inner workings of a DAO. And Bankless DAO is, publicly what I would qualify one of the most successful DAOs in terms of getting a large community of individuals who don't have any personal relationships, and they've met completely online. And now you've rallied them together around a singular or maybe multiple causes, multiple benefits, areas that they can potentially contribute, and an engine has been built around them. And so, when you guys first joined Bankless DAO, how did you guys even identify that, hey, this is maybe an area that I want to dive into? Like, I love Web3 enough. I understand the capabilities enough. And I think it would be really interesting to start recommending or start advising businesses on how to apply some of these capabilities into their existing models, or maybe net new models as a startup. And so how did that journey for both of you start? You joined Bankless DAO, and for a lot of people, their representation, or within their minds, a DAO is just a Discord server. And so you have all of these channels you have to filter towards. And eventually maybe you land on, is it a Bankless Consulting channel? Is it how did that come to be?
Yeah, go ahead, DSide.
Well, for me, it's pretty similar to what Ryan had said before, that I was in a few different meetings, and the Bankless DAO is what at the time was, I think, consisted of 13 guilds, and all of them particularly related around media and Web3 in some way. But I was feeling my way around: Writers Guild, Marketing Guild, Operations Guild, and then I started hearing buzz about a consulting guild or project, and I just dropped into a meeting. That's basically what it was at the time. I think there were probably 10 or 12 people there, and the group was starting to put together ideas. I think they had already written a grant and written a grant proposal and gotten a grant from the DAO to fund the organization of the consulting group. But nothing had really been put into place yet. So it was early stages, talking about the governance, talking about the business plan and the ability to actually interact with external businesses, which a lot of the DAO, there were projects going on in the DAO. Much of it was to support the DAO, but there were other attempts at external business. So like a merch group or the marketing group was looking to market their services or advertising to the outside world. The challenge for a lot of them was that they didn't have the infrastructure to do business. They didn't have a bank account. They didn't have the financial setup. They didn't have legal. And we knew that, understood that we needed to have all those things in place. And that's what we got cracking on. So from there, we kind of divided up the division of labor and determined, how each of us was going to participate in building the infrastructure.
And so you have 13 people at that time, and come together and, hey, this is going to be a full-fledged business opportunity. Let's go stand it up as a legitimate professional services firm.
Yeah, and I think that conversation probably scared away a bunch of them. So we were whittled down to 7 or 8 of us, and we got to work. I mean, for about 3 months, we were working night and day on this, on putting the business together. Each and every one of us, really.
And how did you, because I imagine there's probably a lot of that hesitation you mentioned from a lot of the degens, right? Because a lot of times right now, especially even at me, if I'm going and searching for specific Web3 expertise that I might have to potentially subcontract or even hire,
Sure.
Finding the degens, finding the actual experts, that I would qualify are legitimately living on chain, so to speak, right? They can tell you the inner workings of this. It's not going and searching 10 Google search results on tokenization and understanding, and now I'm going to go and say I'm a tokenization expert. But it's saying, hey, I understand on the back end what it actually takes to tokenize a potential asset, right? And a lot of these guys, before DAOs and before a lot of these mechanisms were stood up, they were just accepting crypto payment for professional services.
That's right.
I will do this for X and maybe pay me 5 ETH. Did you have a lot of reception amongst your membership or amongst your DAO where it's saying, hey, we're going to up-level this operation, make it a legitimate business, and now we have a formal conduit for us to potentially bid on projects, to formally acquire clients externally? Did that scare a lot of the degens that probably were going to be high-value contributors? Did you see that attract more of your community? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, I think it did. I know there was a moment when we kind of started talking about what it looks like practically, and it came up that at some point, in order for us to pay you, you got to sign a contract, and you got to tell us what your real name is, because you got to fill out forms, like W-8s and things like that, and that rubbed people the wrong way. It's like in some cases, like, oh, this is Web3, and like, yeah, but the IRS still exists. So that's we still have to be cognizant of that. And I think that was like, I mean, that was what we were doing, right? Like we have lawyers that are part of Bankless Consulting, and we have people who are accountants and CPAs and who've stood up businesses and things like that. And I think maybe some of the degens who were just kind of playing it fast and loose, didn't realize how much structure is required to set up a DAO properly legally, or how to set up an on-chain business properly and legally. And every day there's new challenges that we have to overcome. What I think it did do on the other side of it is it allowed people who were maybe not the degens, but they were the people who were professionals who had a long career in a certain area, and had a really deep interest in that, in how Web3 is going to transform that. So marketing and economists, things like that, getting into tokenomics and that sort of thing. It gave them a way that they could contribute in a way where they were working towards something, they were getting paid for it, they were working with real clients, and it was in a way that we were making sure that everything that we were doing was legal and above board.
Yeah, it is a double-edged sword, though. And, we kind of struggle with this challenge to this date where we are native Web3. Everybody is a member of the Bankless DAO, and we live in Web3. But at the same time, we're also professionals and we're legit. So we have a bank account, we pay taxes, and we're doing things, above board. I think some of the people who contribute, some of the contributors struggle with that a little bit. And, as Ryan said, there are people who are less comfortable with having to dox, even privately dox, and give up their social security number for taxes and things like that, because that's not what they want to do. But at the same time, we insist on doing everything legally, ethically, and above board.
Yeah, and you guys are hitting an awesome theme that I want to kind of double click into here. And Ryan, you had mentioned, one of the hardest things was legally standing up this, right? Yeah. And I think there's still a lot of confusion. You can go and research, what are DAOs? You can go and research, Google, how do I stand up a DAO? How do I deploy a DAO? What is the appropriate governance structure? What is the appropriate incentivization structure? Blah, 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 blah. But in reality, we've not really seen major traction on DAOs outside of the Web3 natives. There's not many examples of, major brands or, arguably where a lot of the attention and a lot of the capabilities of a DAO could potentially amplify existing models and existing structures. Those individuals or those organizations have not caught yet onto a DAO. And so I'd be interested from your guys' perspectives on, why do you think that is? Well, what about DAOs is still a substantial barrier of entry to accept it as a legitimate operating model, so to speak?
I think a lot of it has to do with uncertainty. How do you stand up a DAO? Like, there's the Wyoming DAO structure. There's a few different DAO structures that have been kind of tossed out and played with at various state levels and things like that, to create legal entities around DAOs. But I think the consensus in that world is that they're not really, they're not really beneficial. So, for us, we're a C Corp. And the DAO structure is kind of minimal. We operate really as a corporation and all of the things that go along with that. Now we can do that because we're smaller than the average DAO. If you have a DAO of 10, 15,000 people, it becomes a lot harder to who are officers, who are directors, all of those kind of legal obligations that come along with it. So that becomes difficult. And there's also a tension between the legal responsibilities of any kind of legal entity and just the ethos of DAOs. Like, if there's a board of directors, well, that's centralization. And if there are, people who are, if there are shareholders, like, then should everybody be a shareholder? But then, that raises questions about, what the legal status of what you're trading is. So, I think it is very difficult for any business right now to go headlong into a DAO because there is so much uncertainty around it, and try to get legal and accounting advice about DAOs, and it's just stumps everybody unless they're really into it. So we're very lucky that we have a lot of people who are Web3 native, but also have that legal or accounting background, so they can bring those two things together. But we, even with our accounting firm that we work with, we have to educate them on a regular basis about, okay, so we got paid in ETH for this one, so what's our cost basis? And it is very difficult. It's like starting a business on hard mode, effectively, from a lot of perspectives.
Probably God mode for that level.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when you think of what a lot of what I would say Web3 maxis evangelize about DAOs, it's counterintuitive to most organizational hierarchies and structures that exist today. I'll go out on a limb and say 99% of businesses are built on a centralized organizational hierarchy. There's a board of directors, there's a CEO, COO, there's various levels of the C-suite, directors and officers, blah, 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 right? There's a very, very hierarchical setup there. DAOs, at their core concept or fundamentally, disrupt that model, right? Mm-hmm. And so, to your point, one of the biggest barriers of entry, and maybe out loud here, thinking out loud, is centralized organizations trying to adopt a pure decentralized structure is almost counterintuitive to maximize the efficiency of that business, because that business natively does not operate decentralized from the beginning, right? And so where do you see the pros and cons of a DAO potentially being adopted by actual organizations, Fortune 500s, for example, or Fortune 2000, or even a mid-market company that has the nimbleness and the flexibility to go and, hey, I want to test around with this concept and play around with this concept with maybe one of my BUs or one of my verticals or one of my subsidiaries. How would you guys approach that type of discussion with them as a prospective client?
I'll try that one out. I think the big answer to that, the one-word answer to that, is community. So the strength of a DAO really is in community, in that it gives the opportunity for contributors or employees to intermingle with clients or customers. So you could have a DAO where the and by the way, I'm not a traditionalist or a purist when it comes to DAOs. I'm a firm believer that there needs to be leadership, centralized leadership in a DAO, decision make, not necessarily all the decisions, but leadership and guidance from a centralized place. But the strength of a DAO really comes from the community building, where there's interaction, involvement, engagement from the community, including contributors, including customers who can be contributors as well. So that's I think that will play out in many ways. And we see that in some NFT communities. We see it starting to happen in brand loyalty. I mean, that's really going to be, brand loyalty projects will likely evolve into DAOs or have some sort of DAO-based structure in a lot of ways, where there's opportunities for essentially for customers to become to have a voice in the direction of a company.
Wow, I love that concept, right? Because let's say you as a customer, especially as we know Gen Z and the younger generations are placing a much more higher emphasis on brands that they are actually loyal to. Brand loyalty is one of the largest signals now for potential customer acquisition for a brand, right? It's becoming a measurable metric, so to speak. And it only seems appropriate that brands that have substantial omni-channel social media followings have, I would almost say, kind of an easy button for community activation, right? If you're a brand that has
Sure.
10, 15, 20 million followers across different social media channels, you've got a cohort of individuals that are loyal to your brand because they like the product, they like your mission values and what have you, right? They like your positioning and all that. And they're most likely also your biggest evangelists and your biggest ambassadors. And so why not go and acquire them as potential inputs into the business or potential, what I would say proxy marketing ambassadors on behalf of the brand. And I think that's just that core concept alone. I think a lot of marketing departments of major organizations have not really realized the potential in that because it's such a social media metric dominated industry, right? Is this getting 500 views or 10,000 likes, right? And that's the measure of success.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Yeah.
Sorry, go.
No, go ahead.
I think community has been kind of the holy grail for marketing since Web 2. And, what I've seen of the marketing world in the last decade is a move kind of away from creativity and messaging and really like understanding people at a fundamental level towards just pleasing the algorithm. Like it happened slowly, but that's really where marketing went in the last 10 years. And what I think is really interesting about Web3 and DAOs just kind of in general is that it kind of decentralizes community to a certain extent. Meaning you don't need to go through Facebook. You don't need to go through Instagram. You don't need to go through Twitter. It gives you a way to create a group of people that you can connect with and give them things through either airdrops or mint opportunities or token gated commerce or, access to discords, things like that. It gives the ability to do that without, Facebook coming in and saying, well, actually, we're going to ramp up the difficulty now unless you pay us, which is really what happened over the last 10 years. I think, back when I was sort of, the first wave of my career was like, social media is the future. Now it's kind of like Web3 is the future. That's like I saw a lot of the sort of the optimism around that, and brands really trying to take these new spaces that have been created to genuinely kind of interact with their customers. And it was the fact that the social media companies really just turned it into a kind of an extractive process. And in this position, they can't. Because now companies, in the same way that we can own our own digital assets in Web3, companies can own their own access to their community, which I think is a really interesting factor for them.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Whenever I engage a prospective client and they're always asking, I need to improve my customer acquisition strategy, let's say from a Web 2 perspective. Right? They're thinking customer acquisition, how do I lower my customer acquisition costs? How do I maximize my retention? How do I upsell? How do I penetrate new markets, cross-sell, blah, 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 blah. And I just wish, especially for a lot of traditional brands, I could just come in and say, the X factor for your brand in the next 5 years for any brand is going to be the ones that double down on a full-fledged community strategy and brand build-out. Mm-hmm. You could potentially negate customer acquisition cost with a fully robust community strategy and execution of that community, because now you've cultivated and harvested your brand loyalists within your own walled garden, so to speak. And that's the luxury, right? To your point of the social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, those are not within a brand's walled garden. Those are third-party mediums that these brands are reliant on, right? But now you've brought, let's say, for example, and this will be fun. Let's go through a potential scenario. I'll just use fantasy baseball because it's the flavor of the week for me in my mind. But fantasy baseball, let's say that there is a sub-community of individuals that are really into fantasy baseball. And I am let's say ESPN, and I want to really expand my fantasy baseball product. It would make sense for ESPN potentially to go to maybe all of the subreddits, all of the different channels, the Twitches, what have you, of baseball fans, get them into a ESPN community, so to speak, of other like-minded fantasy baseball individuals, and now you've just immediately put 15,000 people of potential customers of your product in one channel. And you can become the selling mechanism for that, right? And I don't think a lot of brands have recognized that, or it's even on their radars. And so what do you guys think needs to change for community building to be taken more seriously by, the next wave of companies that are looking into Web3?
I think that brands have to sort of reevaluate their role at the party, to so to speak. I think that when Web 2 kind of started, it was a lot of brands kind of went into it in like they're used to being the center of attention. They were broadcasters. They were the celebrities, and they expected to be kind of treated that way when they welcomed people into a party. The party was for them. It wasn't for the people. I think they have to move away from that kind of view. Like they're servant leaders kind of to a certain extent of their brand community. In the same way that I think that DAOs are going to force companies to rethink what management is fundamentally, what the nature of work and how we communicate and how we, collaborate on things. I think that in the same way, it's going to cause brands and corporations to rethink what their relationship is with their customers.
Yeah, I think there are, using your example, Siva, I think there's a huge opportunity for exactly that, where communities don't have to be brand-based. They can be interest-based, right? So if you have a community of people who are interested in fantasy baseball, they're already there. As using Ryan's analogy, they're having the party. And who do they want to invite? Do they want to invite ESPN? Do they want to invite Gatorade? Do they want to invite, whoever else to come in? And, they're a collection of 15,000 people who are a very focused audience, very attentive audience on whatever that product might be, or whatever that education might be. It's kind of turning the tables on commerce in a way.
There's also a generational shift, right? And let's think about that, right? Like if you want to say, CMO, most CMOs tend to be older, unless if they're much more retail focused.
Present company excluded, of course.
Yeah. Or if they're D2C oriented, they tend to be younger, but most CMOs or most organizations tend to skew on the older side. And community engagement and community building is a generational shift. It is our generation, the older millennials, that are driving that, right? And Gen Z, that's where they're starting to live,
sure.
Right? And I had one executive. I was doing a speaking engagement down in Texas, of 50 executives that don't understand anything Web3, and I was just educating them. And one of them came out, and gentleman was in his mid 60s, and he's like, I don't understand communities. Can you talk to me about the success of a community? I'm like, well, I don't want to be offensive, but you're not the target. You could be a potential target, but you're not the initial target of building a base community around. You would be a contributor to a community or a potential facilitator of a community. But the participant in the community, there's tremendous amount of successes today that are not deployed by businesses. Subreddits are a great example of individual microcosms of communities, but Facebook groups, where potentially his guys are now living, right, on Facebook. But Facebook groups are one of the best examples of intimate communities that eventually grow over time. And, some Facebook groups monetize, right? They start bringing in sponsors, they start bringing in preferred vendors and what have you, right? They might even charge membership fees. I'm in a Facebook group where I pay a membership fee, if you can believe it or not. But right, that's just the Discord model, right? But just on a different platform.
Sure. Siva, how do you see that potentially shifting towards DAOs?
Yeah, well, I think a community is the underlying infrastructural mechanism that a DAO has to be built upon, right? Sure. A DAO is, and to your guys' earlier point, a DAO is only as successful as its community. And if you have a really well thought, built out community, DAOs that are constructed fulfilling the visions of the community and executing upon the values of a community in a governance structure that is appealing to the community and approved by the community, I think are going to be the examples of this DAO community operating model. And I'll call it an operating model because that's what it is, right? It's a it can evolve into a business operating model. yWhales is a small testament to the success of a pseudo DAO. We're not a DAO. We aren't formally incorporated as a DAO, similar to your guys, yourselves. We are a C Corp. But our community members are the shareholders, right? Our board is the shareholders. The yWhales community owns yWhales Enterprises, and then our subverticals, right? And that's the purview we took because our community is older in nature. We are not a Web3 community of 30 and 40-year-olds. We're a Web3 community of 40 and 50-year-olds, right? And so a corporate structure is the familiar, right? But then a corporate structure intertwined with a community that is the spine of the corporation is our way of executing on a hybrid model, so to speak. To your so to your point and to your question to me, I think organizations that take a small use case, small sliver of a potential community or a potential business unit or vertical or area of business, and start modeling a hybrid model where they implement a traditional corporate structure governance that the community is fully behind and build and lay that on top of a sub community, so to speak, is a great way for brands to start experimenting with this, right? Let's say, for example, I am a retail focused kombucha drink, right? And I know that my primary demographic are the gut health conscious individuals. Well, I can be a kombucha provider, let's say gut friendly, and I go and create a community, and it doesn't have to be a sponsored community by my brand. I go and build that community of like-minded gut health people that want to share their experiences around gut symptoms and how do we enable and better each other. But since I've built that community, I've now created my own sales direct channel of potential customers, 500 people, 1,000 people, 2,000 people, what have you. And as that community continues to grow and I nurture it and it starts to broaden, I can then start amplifying that community via the DAO by selling and marketing and capitalizing on monetization opportunities. Maybe, the top contributors to the DAO earn discounts on products, or maybe the top contributors to the DAO actually have inputs into the packaging. And we can go, and I don't want to turn this into a strategy session now and starting to dominate the session, but that's kind of the way I would approach that, especially with a prospective client. Let's always prove out with a feasible POC first.
Yeah, so I think there's, we've set up a couple of DAOs for some of our clients. One was a charity that worked with, a lot like yours, with entrepreneurs kind of around the world. And one of the challenges they had is that they had a lot of grant recipients that were in developing areas of the world where literally the way that they would get them their grant was, by sending like gift cards and things like that through the mail, because there's no other way to get it to them. So they wanted to set up a DAO around this sort of, proposal for giving model for entrepreneurs to have a little startup capital. And I think the biggest challenge for them was we were able to get it set up, and they had a very successful few rounds of doing it. But, when it came time to hand it off, there was sort of a realization from their end that, this is not just something that runs itself. Like DAOs require a lot of not only just setup, but prolonged effort to keep things moving. Community is something that requires constant energy. You can create a community of 15,000 people. There's stories at the beginning of when we were still in the bear market or in the bull market of 10,000 people joining a Discord from one tweet. But if you don't know what to do with those people, and you don't know how to keep them motivated and on the same page and interested and participating and incentivized, then it starts to get quiet. It starts to fall off. And the people that, are contributing feel like, okay, well, we've been rugged by this whole thing. So I think the key thing is that brands who want to get into this space need to understand that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Like they have to keep putting in the effort. And if you just, if you go hard for the first 1,000 meters, you're just going to be gagging by the end of it. So.
And that's important, right? Because it's not as simple as saying, hey, I'm Louis Vuitton. I'm going to go spin up a Louis Vuitton community and expect I can get 10,000 people to just join, and it's going to be a self-operational community, right? There's very much an intentional engagement strategy that occurs. That's a full-time job or jobs, plural, right? How do you ensure that the members of that community are not always seen as an end product to be sold to, right? But their insights and their contributions are valued enough that they are willing to devote, time and their thoughts into this community for some sort of hopefully end output of value to themselves, right?
Sure.
And
entropy is a powerful force. So that's why every DAO needs not only a great plan going in and strategy for that, but a long-term sustainable strategy and strong management, just like any other organization, with plans to engage people and to organize them and to keep the ball rolling in the right direction. I've definitely seen not necessarily DAO communities, but NFT type communities that have just lost their way. And it becomes, a nightly shouting match on a Discord. I participated in one early on in my Web3 experience, and I was like, this is not what this should be about. I need to get out of here. And did exactly that, but I learned a lot from it. And the reality is, like I said, long-term sustainable strategy and management is super important in this space.
Well, it was really easy when the number kept going up. It was really easy to keep people engaged. So you could kind of do the bare minimum, and as long as people were getting rich, like everybody was happy. I think one that has done a really good job of navigating the market as it went, and not just relying on like, bear market, what are you going to do? Is Truth, which they had the Illuminati NFT. They are also behind Goblin Town, and they've got a few other things. And they're really interesting because they started with one thing. They built a lot of lore around it. They got people really interested. Then they dropped this free mint of Goblin Town that everybody was talking about. It was Twitter Spaces with people talking in goblin voices, about, pissing on the floor and things like that.
Wild times in Web3.
Completely different than anything else that was out there. So, and the fact that they kept adapting as it went, and they kept expanding, and they kept rewarding the people who were early, that we were rewarding the people who were more heavily invested, and really communicating with them and talking to them, I think is a testament to their ability to run a community. There's not many that I think reached that level of community.
And there's a huge focus right now that community and DAO building is got it. I mean, rightfully so. That's where the traction is, or that's initially where people think the traction is. But as a B2C mechanism, when really it's a very powerful B2B mechanism, right? Think of how many organizations, especially within the construction industry or manufacturing, anything that has to deal with multi-level, either vertical integration or supply chain, when you're dealing with so many different parties. That is an opportunity to bring a community around your brand, right? Let's say I am a custom home builder, and I know I have to interact with 15 different vendors, my door glass manufacturer, my siding blah, 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 right? And as a project, we create a sub-channel within my community, and now every project has engagement, real-time 24/7 engagement with my vendors. So there's no, I immediately eliminate, logistical nightmares because I'm communicating live with them. Maybe I'm doing direct fulfillment because we're actually jumping on calls together right away. And just even streamlining mechanisms of communication within a business model is enough of a value to go and dive into, maybe building out and pressure testing what a community could look like for a business as small as something like a custom home builder, right? And and that's what's frustrating to me, to be transparent, is that people can test this and they can test it very quickly.
Sure.
And they can really prove out the feasibility, within the first couple of months. Is this something that's actually going to be beneficial to my company? But we just haven't gotten to that point in the conversation where brands are even thinking about this, right?
Yeah, and I mean that example specifically, like, brings to mind the idea that it's not like community is a new concept. So we've been doing this for a long time. If you think about, like, that's what a lot of these sort of like lodges and Masonic temples and things like that. That's what a lot of that was, for people to come together as a community and share those kinds of resources and share opportunities. And if you were a window maker and you had somebody who was a contractor and they were one in your whatever kind of lodge or whatever you had, you would go to them over somebody else, and you would kind of create that community in and of itself. And it wasn't moderated by brands, but the idea has always been there to kind of build this thing together.
That's interesting, because I think one of the most important things that all brings together is trust, which I think is a whole topic in this space, where, I mean, so much of what is going on in Web3 is about trust or lack of, like, who can you trust, right? So I think that's one of the challenges that we all as a industry need to address. It's important that being in like-minded communities, where there is sort of similar values, it creates spaces where you can trust people, as opposed to other investments or projects that are going on in this space, where I think that's a lot of people's perception of what Web3 is, when the reality is it's really building towards these trusted communities. And that's more of the promise of Web3, as opposed to the speculation and ability to, make millions just by buying a token.
Hey,
Don't trust those guys.
2023 online relationship building has been proven to be, the next kind of way of social engagement, right? It's no longer taboo. And we're starting to see it with business, right? Entire businesses built with people that have never met each other, right? Mm-hmm. That's crazy to think about. So we talked DAOs, we talked communities. What other stuff are you guys working on? What's top of mind here in terms of some interesting work that have come across your guys' desk here within the past 12 months?
Probably one of the more interesting ones that we worked on was it was a television show that wanted to kind of build in Web3 directly into their distribution strategy, but all the way down to being able to, like, fact check and research and punch up scripts and things like that. They wanted to be really, it was led by an actual Hollywood writer. But they wanted to bring in a community of people that not only could just contribute like one-off things, but maybe where, you could raise somebody up from the community to be part of the writer's room, things like that, and give people an opportunity that they wouldn't necessarily get, without moving to LA and, getting a rich guy's coffee for 5 years. So I think that was a really interesting one. It was also very interesting from a point of view of, it was connected to someone, people all around the world. Like, a big part of the team was in Ukraine. And, that was a really interesting experience because, we were talking to them in the middle of, something terrible happening in their country. So, it was interesting to see that perspective and them kind of persevering through it, trying to make art out of what was happening there. So I think, from my perspective, I think it was just, it's an opportunity that I wouldn't necessarily get, just, working for an agency or something like that, where you get that real kind of global exposure to just people all over the world.
Yeah, and we have projects that are completely Web3 based, some that are with traditional companies that are dipping their toes into this space. My biggest project to date has been one where a doctor wrote a protocol, and we helped him through a lot of that, the architecture of it, and the tokenomics and governance behind it. The protocol is essentially a tokenizing knowledge, and originally he came to this idea of like the fact that there was so much false information floating around about COVID and vaccinations and things like that. And he wanted a solution for that. So this protocol will allow consensus, essentially, to community consensus from credentialed individuals to determine truth, which
interesting.
Which there are so many applications for this. We've talked about it in terms of journalism and medicine, politics, you name it. There's the possibilities are endless. And people, one of the cool things about the ecosystem is it's really about participation and, positive contribution in terms of of course, like being an expert and, being able to contribute factual information, but also contributors who contribute valuable questions as well. So, for instance, I was playing basketball on Saturday. I twisted my knee, and it's all swollen now. Can someone, what should I do, or what's going on? Which, it's no one's diagnosing anybody on remotely like that. But the premise would be to get information to that patient, to be like, it's possible you sprained your knee. You should probably get an MRI. That's the gold standard for this kind of situation. See an orthopedist. But that the person who actually asks the question will be rewarded as well, because that's a valuable question that other people will ask in the future. And for every person that asks that, they'll be rewarded. In addition, experts will be rewarded for slashing as well, for pointing out false information.
Yeah, incentivizing people, to engage, and incentivizing people to create content, so to speak. So you have the content creation, or the questions, you have the engagement, the people providing answers, and you have a library of knowledge being built. And so,
exactly.
all parties. That's awesome.
Exactly that. And we see a lot of applications, particularly as AI becomes more and more prevalent, because of the fact checking and other possibilities that can happen. Where we're bringing actual knowledge to the conversation.
And that's awesome. I mean, AI is the flavor of the choice, or flavor of the year, right? Yeah, last year's Web3 experts are this year's AI experts. Sure. That's at least that's what LinkedIn is telling me, right? Yeah. But and what's frustrating for our industry is, there has been such a shift. Web3 has been, at least on from a content or marketing perspective, has taken a backseat to these LLMs, right? The newest capabilities of generative AI tool sets, or Bard or ChatGPT or what have you. But I have a personal thesis. Well, it's probably not personal. I think it's hopefully a growing perspective that, for a lot of these AI models to be largely successful, it's going to be incumbent that they are built on a kind of blockchain backbone, right? To facilitate more efficient movement of data, to validate, a lot of the, functionality. Right now, I think if you guys played around with ChatGPT before they actually rolled it out, when it was still in beta, there's a lot of times that the AI was just recommending wrong shit, right? Like there was no fact, and to your point,
still is to this day.
Yeah. But imagine now, like for your client example, establishing a consensus of validated truth, right? Hitting a 51% consensus mechanism, saying that, hey, 51% of people have validated that what this AI said is true. That's a capability where now ChatGPT can introduce an attestation functionality to its model, and saying that, hey, the AI ChatGPT recommended, this output, this outline, and it's been validated by 72% of people that have gone and asked the same type of. Imagine how much more valuable something like that would be, and that can't be built without having a chain or some sort of central conduit of data that is helping to provide all of those inputs into the model. Right? It can't be accomplished in web, cloud infrastructure.
And it can't be a black box either, because you need to be able to trace where it's coming from.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the beauty where Web3 comes in. And I love that.
Nice. Steve, I'm glad you like it. The founder is about to start a raise. So.
Oh, well, I think that might have to be an intro opportunity into ventures here.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, so Web3 has a branding issue right now, right? I mean, right now people hear Web3 and I can immediately tell you the first thought that comes to most people's mind is complicated, convoluted, poor user experience, right? I mean, it's just unthinkable when you think about what's going to be an adoption event for the industry. It's how do you promote a better user experience, right? But the way the industry is going, and we just kind of hit on this, eventually a lot of the capabilities similar to Web 2, right? No one is leading a company right now saying, we have the best, cloud infrastructure backend set up to support our company operations. We use AWS. We use, AWS and Azure and Google Cloud are not, selling value props. It's the capabilities, right? And so when we think about Web3 evolution, we're very early, right? And I think that's a big thing that people need to understand. We are still so early that people just don't really understand, what we would qualify as natives, basic functionality around like what is an NFT, right? And so what does the industry need to do, and where do you see the next largest opportunities for Web3 to really evolve its position as sort of the next frontier of emerging technology?
Yeah. Well, Siva, first of all, I'd like to thank you for inadvertently plugging our podcast early. That's the name of our podcast. It's exactly that. I mean, it's a reference to exactly that. We are early, right? And we are building the infrastructure, and that's exactly what's going on. And I think a lot of people in this space have this idea. NFTs sort of, the NFT craze of 2 years ago, I believe got in a lot of people's heads that, okay, Web3 is for everybody. This is fun. We're all going to do it. But that's not what it is. It's more infrastructure. It's more about the behind the scenes of what's happening on the internet. And it's kind of a new internet. It's more secure. It's frictionless. It's decentralized, which there's a lot of value in that. But the end user is not going to feel most of that. Most of the folks who are here now, I assume the three of us all have wallets, right? So we all have sovereign money, and we all do our own banking in Web3 and things like that. Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody should do that. But there's still a lot of value for the average end user if the infrastructure is there. So there's particularly things like monetary exchange, security. Ryan, help me out here. A couple of other things, just values that Web3 brings to the average end user without it really being in their face.
Yeah, I mean, just the ability to trust someone you don't trust because code can't lie to you. Sure. If you are engaged in a smart contract with somebody, if you buy an NFT or you sell an NFT on a reputable site, it's always going to go through. But I think a big challenge there too is around how kind of obfuscated all of that is. So if you can read a smart contract, exactly what's going to happen. But how many people can read Solidity code, really? So when we think about how we all use the internet every day, when's the last time you thought of TCP/IP or SMTP? You just log into Gmail. I think the move from Web 1 to Web 2 was a move from protocols to very easy ways of interacting with those protocols. And we kind of lost something there. And then Web 3 is back to the protocol level, but now we've introduced money as a protocol. And so I think the next logical evolution of that is going to be, let's forget about NFTs. Let's forget about, ERC 721. We're going to be looking at it more just like the web instead of Web3.
But I think what is cool about that, and you kind of you mentioned, smart contracts. The fact that so many things that we do in our everyday life are just like so burdened with red tape, and if you can trust the code, which there will be eventually, there will be certifications and reputable companies that you deal with that are essentially Web3 backbone or infrastructure companies for things like buying and selling a house or car or like major interactions that will strictly be on code, and you won't have to read through a 1,000-page contract because it's a trusted contract that's based on code. So that's just one example.
Yeah, and there would have to be some sort of bodies or councils or DAOs that attest and certify these code bases.
Very good use case for a DAO.
Right?
I like that.
Right? Yeah. To say, because right now, if I say, hey, I want to go and deploy a cloud instance off of Google Cloud, I just have to basically trust Google and the integrity of their infrastructure and the integrity of their security. But a DAO could come in as a third-party tester, validator, certifier, and say that this has passed our most rigorous standards, and we qualify this, we certify this to be an A+ code base, blah, 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 blah. Boom. I think we just conceptualized a pretty good use case for a DAO there.
That's pretty good.
Don't steal my idea. But no, I mean, I love that, right? I mean, I tell, some clients, I have a client right now that's talking about NFTs. And one of the first things I tell them is we are not going to go to market by saying NFTs. We are not, because it's going to completely diminish the value of what you're trying to bring to market. We are going to leverage NFT technology to power these capabilities, but the end user is never going to know that they're interacting with an NFT. They're just going to view this as, hey, I go and acquire this asset. This asset allows me to access this community. And now we've just sold the whole customer experience, the customer journey, and the customer doesn't care. And even the client doesn't care how it's done as long as it's done, right? And I think that's the reframing, at least personally, that I think has to happen within our industry. And that's kind of, if you think about it from Web 1, right? All the people that were stressing Web 1 were the people that understood MS-DOS and binary and all that stuff. And so the evangelists had to be the technically minded people to gain some traction. I feel like that's where we're at right now with Web 3. It is the protocol builders. It is the developers. And then they tend to be the startup founders and leaders right now in Web3. They are the most technically minded people that can talk about the protocols at a level to gain some traction. But there's going to be an inflection point where it's, what is the experience that you're receiving now, right? And maybe that kind of selfishly, and I want to dig into you guys a little bit here, is how do you guys kind of complete your selling motion with prospective clients? If I'm a Fortune 500 and all of a sudden I need to learn about Web3 and I Google Web3 consulting and Bankless Consulting is one of the top 3 results, but all I hear is degens and, I'm worried that, I'm going to have a couple of avatars consulting for me and I'm going to pay them. Like, how do I engage you guys? How do you guys root me in some trust and confidence?
So it really depends on the organization. Most of our engagements are pretty bespoke. People come to us with a very specific problem, and we give them a solution. But I think especially for the traditional companies that are looking to get into Web3, we offer a few different things around education. We also offer what we call the Web3 Discovery Sprint, which is really it's a design thinking kind of process that helps them understand what Web3 is and what the primitives of Web3 are and how they apply, and in a lot of cases, the resources and what they need to change internally to maximize that. So we kind of take them through a 4-week process where we really dig into their idea and give them a really clear roadmap and playbook as to how they can implement it. And that's been really interesting because, I think on one end, we've started with one idea and we've seen it kind of go down this twisting and winding road as the client sort of understands what is going to be required of it, to see it change into something completely different, which is always really interesting. And in a lot of cases, we see, we can see something that we create that's more than it started with. So what I find interesting about that one is, obviously we always follow up with clients and see, how they're feeling about the project and everything like that. And, in my career, I've worked with hundreds of clients, and the ones that come out of the Web3 Discovery Sprint are among the happiest I've ever worked with. Like, the insights that they kind of come away with, that in some cases they come up with on their own, like we guide them towards it. Yeah. It is really satisfying to see when it comes from just starting at a kind of basic idea and then turns into something that's real and that can be, possibly, game changing.
It sounds like, you've kind of, as part of your engagement dynamic, is you've already rooted clients in a sense of transparency, because you're investing in the education of the clients themselves to get them to speaking a common language, right? Because that's to be transparent here, when I engage with a couple of Fortune 500s, there's a substantial amount of time that I have to devote to just educate them, to get them to the point of how they're seeing things that we are seeing things, right? Especially when you think about a topic as complicated as potentially tokenization of an asset, right? I mean, you have to, what is tokenization? What is the value? How do we do it? Why is it on chain? How is this accomplished? Blah, 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 right? And you can't just expect clients, especially in what I would call, we're still in the Wild West. We're still, Web3 is still fringe. It's not in the mainstream yet. And so there isn't a tremendous amount of time that you have to devote to educate clients to eventually get them to the point where they can understand the level of recommendations and outputs that you guys are suggesting to them to really value the recommendations, right?
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about Web3 is you can read about it and you can hear about it and you can kind of understand it, but until you kind of walk through the door of Web3 and really like participate in it, it's very hard to understand, the actual reality of it. And I think that like a part of our job is showing the client the optimistic side of Web3, like the idea that we're kind of working around a common purpose, incentivized by our ownership in something, but also the dark sides of it. The security, like understanding the risks of getting into Web3, understanding what's required in terms of governance, in terms of the community aspect of things. So we try to give them as holistic a view as possible to show the good and the bad. And I think that that's just something that's always been a part of being on the cutting edge of things. Like I remember, back when I was, working in marketing early in my career, and, around 2008, we were talking about things like Twitter and blogs and YouTube and things like that. And I remember doing a presentation for somebody, and it was an older guy. And I gave him like a full idea of like how brands are this is going to fundamentally change how brands interact with customers. And the thing that he ended with was, why would I want to look at pictures of other people's lunch? And that was just like, oh man, if you can't see it, I can't force you to look at it. So, I think we have a lot of that same thing in this space. Like, oh, it's just pictures of, badly drawn monkeys. And like, yes, it is. There is a lot of stuff in Web3 that is kind of stupid if you look at it objectively. But
90% of it is stupid, I would say.
Yeah. But there's also, in that stupidity, there's a lot of really like huge potential for changing the way we interact with things.
Yeah. It's frustrating, to be honest, because our industry is overshadowed by the stupidity of a lot of the projects that come to market because they get a lot of traction, and the underlying innovation is not really highlighted, right? And that's where the diamond in the rough is, right? And your Web3 discovery mapping exercises sound like that's what you point towards, right? It's, hey, let's do this journey with you guys. Let us understand what you guys are trying to achieve. Let us educate how this could be feasibly done, and this is potentially how we would execute upon this. And I love that approach because it's go and talk to the natives that understand, that are living in the depths of crypto Twitter and the depths of the Web3 sub communities. Or you can engage, and I have an experience, so I just want to talk about this real quickly. But I just competed on an RFP where we had to compete against the Accentures and the Capgeminis and the Deloittes, and it was a blockchain RFP. And I'm reading their proposal. This client publicized all of the RFP proposals that were pushed, and I read the proposals because I'm interested how these big firms are, approaching Web3, especially blockchain departments. And it's very clear that these firms, and I don't want to call out, specific names or anything, but, it's very clear that they've staffed, a team of 3 to 5 individuals that are really good at researching very quickly and putting a lot of Web3 buzzwords and blockchain, concepts together and put that in within a pricing proposal. And one of the proposals from one of these big firms misdefined the differences between layer zeros, layer ones, and layer twos. And I was just struck back. And I was like, that is just such a core fundamental concept. Mm-hmm. And that was put out as a $500,000 proposal for a client, right? And that's going to be considered. And it's Web3, to your point, Ryan. It's not an industry that you can just Google and review a lot of YouTube videos, or it's not you can go and do a Udemy crash course for over 48 hours and become a certified blockchain architect. It requires you to actually be playing on chain, playing with the technology, getting in the communities and understanding it, right? Getting into the Bankless DAOs, so to speak, and
Sure.
sharing, and learning and collaborating with other like-minded individuals, right? And that's where the real expertise, that's where the real innovation is coming from.
Yeah, great points. And it's interesting because I think we as an organization and our contributors often forget that and don't always realize or recognize the knowledge we have. I think we sometimes take it for granted, just assuming that, sure, anyone in this space knows this stuff. Anyone who would want to be in this space knows this stuff. But that's where the value of something like Web3 Discovery Sprint comes in, where we need to be educators. We actually have significant value in, and even myself, I'm a non-technical person, but I have a good grasp, a good understanding of what's going on here just from being here for a few years. And, I find myself talking to people who are sort of like just stepping into this space. And I often just kind of look in the mirror. I'm like, wow, I know a lot of shit. And I think we do take it for granted. And it's really important that we recognize that and capitalize on it. But just, feel it as a value and recognize that there are other folks out there that can really benefit from our knowledge and our base.
Awesome. I love it. Well, gentlemen, I thank you for your time today. This was a great conversation. I think we talked on it. It was a really engaging. We touched almost every major spectrum of Web3 in terms of how companies are actually leveraging it. So I loved it. So if someone's listening here and they want to engage with you guys, what's the best way for them to do so?
Best way probably go to banklessconsulting.com. We've got a form there that you can fill out to get in touch with us, and we respond to everybody who writes to us.
Yep, we're also on Twitter, Bankless Consult, at Bankless Consult, and we have a newsletter, banklessconsulting.substack.com, and I host our podcast. It's called Early. It is the business of Web3 from Bankless Consulting. So that's on Spotify, YouTube, you name it, wherever you find your podcasts, check it out.
Awesome.
And at Ryan Anderson.
Yes, on Twitter.
And I'm at _DSide on Twitter.
And yWhales is an appearance on that early podcast, so we urge our listeners to check that out as well.
That's right, dropping in a week.
We're on the flip side, so it's always awesome to be
Nice.
interviewed. Ryan, DSide, thank you guys again. Awesome conversation. Thank you, yWhales listeners, and wherever you are, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good night.